Hello everyone, this week's video, Dvar Torah, is sponsored by Merv and Sharon Algie in memory of Merv's sister, Hillary Mafsowitz, Hilela Bat Svi Aleha Shalom, whose yahrzeit is on the 9th of Shvat, and we think Merv and Sharon should be as a chesed and aliyah for her neshama. Thank you. I'd like actually to return to psukim that I discussed a little bit a couple of weeks ago in Parshat Shemos. When Moshe goes out to see and observe the experience of the Jewish people, in just a few psukim, the Torah captures the Jewish experience of slavery, and several people after my words on that week discussed it with me further. And Moshe sees two things. On the first day, he goes out, Vayar ish mitzri maka ish ivri. He sees the Egyptian beating the Jewish slave. And of course, he saves the Jewish slave, he kills the Egyptian, and he hides him in the sand. There was the suffering from the Egyptian oppressors, and again, that challenge, that problem, Moshe could solve. But on the second day, there are two Jewish people fighting, struggling with one another. Moshe confronts them, and he says to him, Rasha, to the wicked one, Lama takarecha, why are you hitting your friend? This is not just a random incident, didn't just happen to be here. The Torah is trying to capture in an example what was going on. There was great division and fighting within the Jewish people. Often in bad times, in times of trouble, in times of danger, when people have to look out for themselves, so people become selfish. People fight. People compete for the scarce commodities. They respond to Moshe, who made you judge, who made you the leader? There was no leadership, there was no respect for leader or authority, there was no one guiding them. So the Jewish people were struggling with themselves, understandably so. In difficult times, that often happens. The group, the community, the country, there are external threats, but it also breaks down from within. And so Moshe Rabbeinu's great mission to redeem the Jewish people was, one, to defeat Paro and to rescue them from the Egyptians, but that was the easy part. The greater challenge of his mission was to create a people, was to take these Jews, these Ivrim, these foreigners, strangers who had no common identity, no common sense of peoplehood, who fought with one another, who competed with one another, certainly did not work with one another, to turn them into a people, into a nation, into a group with a cohesive identity. And that was a much greater challenge. On some level, Moshe Rabbeinu succeeded, perhaps not fully. Maybe he did as much as he could. But on some level, from the Egyptian experience, from the Exodus, from the redemption under Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership, he did create a people, our ancestors, Bnei Yisrael. Returning to the Parsha this week, Parshas Bo. Hashem instructs Moshe to command the Jewish people with the mitzvah of the Karban Pesach, the Passover offering, sacrifice, that they offered that year in Egypt, slaughtering the animal, sprinkling the blood on the door of their homes, and for which they were commanded to continue every year once they had reached the land of Israel and going forward in the Mishkan, in the Tabernacle, and then in the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. The Karban Pesach, on the one hand, was meant to symbolize and be a statement of belief in Hashem, of fidelity to Hashem, to His Torah, to be faithful in Him. However, our commentaries from the ancient to the most current also explain that the other great theme, the other great idea of the Karban Pesach, what it was meant to symbolize and also elicit, was this sense of nationhood, of peoplehood, of commonality and unity among all of the Jewish people. And I'd like to just point out in a few examples and different details, language of different verses that point to this. In this week's Parsha, the Torah repeats and stresses over and over, Dabru el kol adat Yisrael, speak and share this mitzvah with the entire assembly of Israel. V'shachatu oso kol kahal adas Yisrael, and the entire congregation of the assembly of Israel shall slaughter the animal. And later on, kol adat Yisrael yasu oso, again the entire assembly of Israel must perform it. There is a stress in the Torah that this is a mitzvah that is meant to be performed, to have the participation of every single Jewish person, cutting across all groups, all divisions, all tribes, whatever would separate us. Here for the Korban Pesach, everyone is invited, everyone is meant to participate. The mitzvah is designed to be performed not by individuals, by groups. The very least a family would come together, but that would be a group. Generally speaking, to eat the entire animal, there would be extended family involved. If a family was not large enough, another family would be recruited. It was meant to bring people together. The halacha is that it is incorrect. Even if there was a small animal that one person could consume on his own, a person is not supposed to offer and eat and celebrate a Korban Pesach alone. It is meant to be offered and celebrated as a group with others, strengthening the bonds within a family and creating bonds between families. On another halachic level, the Gemara derives from the superfluous repetitive verse, V'shachatu oso kol kahal adas Yisrael, the entire assembly of the congregation of Israel, everyone all together should slaughter the animal. The Gemara derives from here, in theory, we could have the entire Jewish people share one Korban Pesach. Practically, that's not feasible. There's not enough meat for everyone to consume, but we could imagine, ideally, the entire Jewish people celebrating offering one animal. The Gemara says, well, if so, obviously only one person will be slaughtering the animal. You can't have thousands of people holding the same knife. The Gemara says, you're right. And the Gemara says, from here we derive, this is one of the sources of the concept of shlichut, of agency, that I can appoint someone else to perform my duty, that we have that connection, that I can act on behalf of another Jewish person. We are connected. The Maharal suggests that some of the details of the sacrifice of the animal are meant to symbolize unity and wholeness and connection. From the fact that the Torah stresses that the animal shall be slaughtered and then roasted whole. The Torah says, the etzem lo tishbrubo, you may not break a bone of the animal. The animal is not to be divided into pieces, ultimately, of course, to be eaten. But initially in its preparation, as is presented to those people at the table, it's the Seder night, it is one whole, intact animal. There is unity. On a deeper level, in this week's Parsha, the Torah already tells the Jewish people what will happen in the distant future. And the Torah says, and when your child will ask, why do you do this? Why do you celebrate Passover? V'yigad levincha b'yomahu, when you will tell your child, for it was God who took me out of Egypt, etc. The Korban Pesach, the offering, the associated mitzvos, the mitzvah Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, was meant to create a common story, what is referred to as a shared memory, so crucial to unite a large group of people that literally there are stories that we tell together. But more deeply, there is a story of where I come from that we share. The mitzvah of the Korban Pesach was meant to create that common shared story and history that would create a common sense of identity. And although the stress is, again, unity, commonality, equal and total participation, we can perhaps also find subtle hints that unity does not require uniformity. Everyone was supposed to participate, but you would sign up for one animal. You would sign up to be part of a certain group. And once you were part of that group, you celebrated your Karban with your Karban Pesach, that Seder, in your home. And just like in Egypt, you were not allowed to leave. You could not join another group. That was your group. And the groups, the animals, were divided. Everyone was celebrating Pesach. Everyone would have joined together in an incredible mass celebration on the grounds of the Beis Hamikdash on the afternoon of the 14th. But the night of the 15th, they did separate. And each family would be in their home, distinct from other families, celebrating in their unique way. There was strong leadership from Moshe, but the Parsha of Karban Pesach is introduced. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aaron. Hashem speaks to Moshe and Aaron, Dabru, both of you together should teach them this Parsha. There was a strong leader that provided direction, Moshe, but he was someone who demonstrated that he worked with partners. He had a brother who was very different from him. Moshe and Aaron had very different personalities, but they both contributed, they worked together, and they modeled how despite differences, people can come together to create something even greater, even more holy, even more beautiful. We have been suffering for some time now by the plague of internal divisions on a national level, on a communal level, and that is a much greater challenge than some external threat, be it an enemy army or a microscopic virus. Moshe Rabbeinu saw Jewish people fighting, hitting one another, and he couldn't solve the problem. He couldn't figure out how to bring them together at that point. But his mission during the time in Egypt and beyond into the wilderness was to bring people together, to create a common story, to create a common identity. There is a sense, I believe, by many, if not most, if not all, that the divisions have become too great. Again, on all levels, nationally, communally, and we want to come together. We want to find a common story, a common mission, a common identity. And we have so much in our community that brings us together. We have the Karban Pesach, we have the Torah, we have shared history, shared memories, a shared story. But it is a great challenge. And just as Moshe Rabbeinu had the assistance of Hashem to bring together fighting slaves, different tribes, different interests, different groups of people, and to create one Bnei Yisrael, Hashem should help us, that we should be able to focus and grow what is common amongst all of us, even when we recognize differences, allow people to have their space in their homes, so to speak, within our community, to express those differences, but we should be able to predominantly be able to focus on our shared identity, our shared purpose, our shared values, and in doing so, we should bring pride to Bnei Yisrael and to what was Moshe Rabbeinu's greatest mission. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.